How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
My fellow Americans, it's Eric Erickson here, and I'm delighted that you have tuned in. Welcome, welcome. Those of you in Georgia, remember, if you text Army to 33777, put in your email address. I will send you an email about the ballot questions. We're getting a lot of phone calls from the audience in Georgia, and I will analyze them. I got to vote for them too, so I'll tell you how I'm voting on that stuff. Text Army to 33777. Now, I gotta get into, well, what's happening with the Democrats right now, and again, you know, I like I said on Friday, I don't mean to make these all like political shows. There's so much other news out there, but this kind of is the biggest news out there, and they're not handling their current situation well. And you should also understand that Democrats are increasingly nervous about the United States Senate. And all of this is weighing in on candidate concerns, among other things. Senator Mitch McConnell's campaign pack is warning Republicans not to get overconfident right now in the Senate, but also the trend lines do look fantastic in Montana. Obviously, we're going to win in West Virginia. Candidate quality matters in Arizona. We're going to lose that seat, Kerry Lake, terrible candidate. Republicans in Arizona seem to be suicidal out there when it comes to picking good candidates. But, I mean, Wisconsin, the trend lines are there for Hovde. McCormick is now a point behind in internal polling, even among Democrats in Pennsylvania. And, Mike Turner looks like he is ahead now in Michigan. Bernie Moreno looks like he might be pulling ahead in Ohio. And Republicans may be able to make up some good ground game in the Senate. And the Democrats, well, they're not really having a normal moment here anymore. This is Maria Cardona on CNN, and just listen to the fear scenarios these Democrats are starting to paint.
But what I'm saying is that the polls that actually have very robust numbers of Latino voters, right? The sample sizes need to be large and robust in order to get the numbers correctly. They have to do bilingual polling as well. A lot of the national polls don't do that. So that's why it's better to focus on the myriad, it's not just one, myriad of polls that know how to poll Latino voters, that have her in the mid to low 60s, which is where she needs to be. Absolutely, she's going to continue to go out there and talk about how she is the one that will fight for Latino voters. There's only one candidate here that wants to keep families together.
We're now getting the arguments of, well, actually, you can't. All of these polls, they're wrong. Only my polls are right, and this level of hysteria as well. Again, Maria Cardona on CNN.
The same voters are his voters, and his voters are going to believe anything and everything that comes out of his mouth. If you are somebody who was looking at what happened on January 6th, even from the range of the political spectrum, from Republicans to Democrats, you looked at that with horror, and you looked at that knowing that Donald Trump was the one who was actually inflaming that and did nothing to stop it. That's not the only thing, Abby. Donald Trump ripped babies from the arms of their mothers. Because of Donald Trump, there is a generation of orphans in this country.
Fact
check. He has said that he would do that
fact
again.
Check. Where's the fact check at CNN? The generation of orphans in this country. Because of Donald Trump, he ripped them from their mother's hands. Actually, this was to stop the human traffickers. He put a little asterisk there on the human traffickers. And then there is, I played this for you earlier, this again, Joyless Reed from MSNBC.
With these claims that Trump is surging with black and Latino voters and leading in every single swing state, according to secret internal polls, despite all the Hitler talk. Yes, this race will be far too close. Because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear, but in small pockets among black and brown men, too. This happens to be a global phenomenon as women become more economically independent and seek positions of power.
Joyless Reed lecturing everyone about the Nazi talk. This isn't the sound of people winning. It's not a hopeful message. If you vote for Donald Trump, it's the Nazis. Except, this is the problem that the Democrats seem to continually find themselves in, is people lived through Donald Trump's first term, and where were the Nazis? Oh, I'm sure Democrats can throw out clever little one-liners like Charlottesville and things like that, but really, where's the Third Reich? Americans actually have a more fond impression of those 4 years than they do now of Joe Biden's. I mean, you didn't have the racist Hitler Nazi talk. In fact, what you did is you had an American media that so bought into the narrative that they kept losing defamation suits like Nick Sandmann because they were so eager to portray him as a little racist at a pro-life event when he was actually the victim. And he sued and he won. The bubble that the press and the Democrats reside in, it's just not reflective of what's going on out there. And they're starting to panic, and they're starting to scream Nazi. They're starting to scream Hitler. They're starting to scream racism. They're starting to scream all these things. Doesn't pan out. I want to go back to this Maria Cardona clip, though. Let me play this for you again. This again, Maria Cardona on Abby Johnson's show on CNN.
The same voters are his voters, and his voters are going to believe anything and everything that comes out of his mouth. If you are somebody who was looking at what happened on January 6th, even from the range of the political spectrum, from Republicans to Democrats, you looked at that with horror, and you looked at that knowing that Donald Trump was the one who was actually inflaming that and did nothing to stop it. That's not the only thing, Abby. Donald Trump ripped babies from the arms of their mothers. Because of Donald Trump, there is a generation of orphans in this country, and he has said that he would do that again.
You got that? Ripped orphan, a generation of orphans. You know why Donald Trump separated children from adults coming across the border? Human trafficking. Human trafficking. Were these really their parents? This is from the Free Press. Deep inside the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services resides a tiny agency called the Office of Trafficking in Persons. A large part of its mission is to help survivors of sex and labor trafficking rebuild their lives and become self-sufficient. Among other things, it offers food assistance, medical benefits, and cash to migrant minors who have been trafficked but have managed to escape. Once their eligibility to obtain benefits is approved, they receive a document called the Child Eligibility Letter. Although the number of child eligibility letters the government issues is supposed to be public information, it became available on the Trafficking Office's website only after filing a Freedom of Information Act request. The numbers confirm trafficking has increased a lot since Joe Biden took office. During the 4 years of the Trump administration, the government issued an average of 625 letters per year to migrant minors who had managed to break free from their traffickers. But in 2021, the first year of the Biden administration, the number jumped to 1,143. In 2022, it jumped again to 2,226. Last year, the number stood at 2,148, but that was only through September. The fourth quarter hadn't yet been counted. To put it another way, forced labor and prostitution among underage minors more than tripled under President Biden, reaching record highs. And that only counted the handful who had escaped, not the thousands who were being held by the traffickers. The sex trafficking of minors and human trafficking as a whole is one of the fastest growing criminal enterprises in the United States, says Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent in Charge Mark Dawson, after a big bust in Houston last year that saw the arrest of 10 traffickers, all of whom had gang connections. Sex trafficking victims often suffer horrific abuse, as the reporter discovered when she spoke to Landon Dickinson, the 36-year-old executive director for Bob's House of Hope in Denton, Texas, the only shelter for male sex trafficking victims aged 18 and up in the country. Dickinson said they've seen teens from Central and South America who've been so tortured by their traffickers, they are barely functional. Dickinson describes caring for teens who have brain damage from being so heavily drugged, teens who've had their fingernails pulled out and lemon juice poured on the wounds. When I interviewed one of their migrant residents, Dickinson said they simply weren't in any condition to speak to anyone, much less a reporter. We think the cartels and gangs use torture as a control method for the males. They're not going to fight back if they chain their victims to a radiator, beat them up frequently, or drug them. The House of Hope residents often come branded or tattooed by the cartels and gangs who traffic them, and most were cross-victimized, used as drug mules, as well as for labor and sex. Bob Williams, CEO and founder of Bob's House of Hope, said they receive 2 to 3 calls a month to help minor males who have been sex trafficked. There's not one shelter in the country for 12 to 17-year-olds, he said. This is a big problem because they get put in the system and don't get the help they need. Williams, who was sexually assaulted as a teen himself, says they're working on procuring more funding to build a program for minors. There's no question the border crisis is the primary reason for the increase in the sex trafficking of migrants. Here's how it works. When underage migrants cross the border unaccompanied by a family member, they're sent to a temporary holding facility run by one of a number of nonprofit organizations out there. The NGOs are expected to move the migrants out within a couple of weeks because there's so many more coming in right behind them. During the time the migrants are in the holding facilities, both the non-governmental organizations and the government are supposed to vet the people who will take them when they depart. These people are called sponsors, and the vast preference of everyone in the system is that they be relatives, but sometimes they don't have a family sponsor, which gives the cartels and gangs an opening. They pretend to be legitimate sponsors. It's a massive uptick. Maria Cardona is more worried about the politics of this than the actual lives. She wants to talk about orphans being ripped from their mothers. Pay no attention to the statistics of what's happening here. Many cases, these young people who are coming to this country aren't with their parents. They're not being ripped away from their mother. They're being ripped away from their abuser. And yet the Democrats want to lecture us on Donald Trump being a Nazi. The Democrats want to lecture us on the racism. The Democrats want to lecture us about kids in cages. Pay no attention to the human trafficking. It's a very, very real problem. And again, I want to point out to you that last year, we only have the data through September. It was about 2,200 young people, migrants who were trafficked that the government gave assistance to. That's 2,200 young people who escaped and then found help to get the resources to do this. 2,200. They escaped and found the resources for help. How many escaped and didn't find the resources? How many have not escaped? The number has gone up. It was just over 600 when Donald Trump left office. You're at 2,200 just through September of last year. This is happening around us, in our cities, in this country, because the Biden administration has maintained an open and porous border and then made it very easy for people to come in here and set up shop. And you got people like Martha Raddatz saying, well, it's just a few apartment complexes. And how many thousands of victims of slavery happening in this country right now that she doesn't even care to ask about because, well, it's not happening in her neck of the woods. It's out there in Aurora, Colorado. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Well, CBS News won't cover Kamala Harris plagiarizing Wikipedia, but they do want you to know that more than 230 doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals are calling on former President Donald Trump to release his medical records, arguing he should be transparent about his health, given his advancing age. None of these people have been concerned about Joe Biden. In fact, Kamala Harris is demanding transparency about Donald Trump's medical records after releasing hers. She wanted no transparency for Joe Biden. Here's Scott Jennings over at CNN.
I think a couple things. Number one, if I were Harris, I wouldn't be leaning too heavily into who's hiding what kind of medical conditions of people who are or want to be the president, given her role in lying about the condition of Joe Biden for the last 4 years. That's number one. Number two, I don't think this works for her. I think I'm back in the same bucket I was earlier. You're not selling your own candidacy. You're punching Donald Trump in the same way every other Democrat we've ever heard from for the last 8-9 years has punched this guy. That's not the problem with your campaign. We've heard all the attacks on Trump. If she cannot sell her own candidacy any better than just punching on him, I'm for her. If I were in her camp, I just don't know it's going to be enough. That's my view.
Yep. Look, and you got all these people now trying to come out and do this. You know what these people have done? These 230 people have now put themselves on a list of we're leaving the country if Donald Trump becomes president. You know, they all think they're going to come after him. They're doing everything they can to stop him. It's such a stupid narrative. I mean, look, I get the man's old, whatever, blah, 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 but really? Y'all, you really actually think that this is going to be effective? No, it's not going to be effective. It's not going to be effective at all because he doesn't care. He's not looking for your approval. And he's going to win more likely than not without your approval. And by the way, Brian Kemp in Georgia firing up his ground game, the AJC reporting. And also there's some breaking news that just happened. The NFL has selected Atlanta to be the home of the Super Bowl for 2028. That's breaking news right now as I'm on air. Also, breaking news. Well, it's not really because it's old news, but it's great news. Old Glory Bank, my bank. They would love to have you partner with them. Old Glory Bank is my bank. Old Glory Bank. You can go sign up, get an account, oldglorybank.com. They would love to have you. They're an online bank, but you can deposit cash. You can get mortgages, loans, you name it. Oldglorybank.com. If you're a conservative, this is a bank by conservatives for conservatives. You're never going to have to worry about being canceled as a bank because they want your business. Oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, terms and conditions apply. I like Old Glory Bank so much that I've even invested in Old Glory Bank because I believe in their mission. And I think that Old Glory Bank is a fantastic organization. I have enjoyed having my account with them. They've got a great debit card set up, a great app. Oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, terms and conditions apply. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. A couple of breaking news bits here. The Atlanta, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta has been chosen for the 2028 Super Bowl. Happened right before I went into commercial break. Big news. I should say I got an email from the stadium essentially saying that I can get reserve priority access to Super Bowl tickets in 2028. That if I want to be on the list to get tickets ahead of everybody else, all I need is a $2,500 deposit that is refundable, and the cost would otherwise go to the tickets. $2,500. I think not. Charlie, you'll be pleased to know I did not spend the money. Nope. Not going to. I mean, I got options. I'm not actually a Falcons fan, even though I live in Atlanta. Love the Braves, but never been a Falcons fan. Grew up in Louisiana, so I like the Saints. I own Green Bay, so obviously I have to root for Green Bay. But I got a couple of Chargers players who are fans and listen to the show, and I feel like I got to root for the Chargers to root for those guys who listen to my show out and take my show to Los Angeles. So. Keeping up with the Chargers and got two different players on that team that listen to the show. And then, I mean, the Saints, but y'all, I got no comment. All right. We have to move on. I've got a couple of different things I want to talk. Well, first, I should note the other bit of breaking news is that Greg Bluestein, great reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, notes that Brian Kemp is firing up his grassroots team here in the state. You're thinking, well, why? Why now? Well, early voting in the state of Georgia only started yesterday. Big turnout in Georgia. And in fact, I sent in my absentee ballot application a month ago. You should know I sent in my absentee ballot application for the primary, and I wound up having a vote on election day for the primary because it never got processed. I don't know what happened, but I never got notification, nothing. This time I was more proactive, and it turns out yesterday they processed my ballot application, and I will get it. I got a text message a while ago that they have placed in the mail. I should get my ballot tomorrow or Thursday. I'll be out of town until Saturday, but nonetheless, I'll be voting absentee. And early voting starts, so the Kemp team is firing up their ground game. They were already focused. They already had ground game in Georgia, but they were focused on state legislative races. Now they'll try to get people to vote the whole ballot top to bottom. So good for them. It's going to be a multi-million-dollar effort by Governor Kemp to get people to turn out and vote. He also wants to help the state legislative Republicans in Georgia. Okay. So I gotta move. I gotta cover something else here too. The other day, Donald Trump made a statement that made Democrats very mad, made Kamala Harris very upset. He said, if we don't change course in this country, he was talking to the Detroit Economic Forum and the Chamber of Commerce there, and he said, y'all may not want to hear this, but if we don't change course in this country, the whole country is going to be like Detroit. Detroit bad, according to Donald Trump. And you know Kamala Harris and her team immediately jumped out to, well, obviously that's racist. That's what they do. Obviously that's racist. Except it's not racist. It's just a fact. And the Harris team attacked Donald Trump for saying that and then said, he's said it about Baltimore. He's said it about Detroit. He's said it about San Francisco. And he's said it about Chicago. Obviously, Donald Trump is a racist. Except he's right. These cities are third world hellholes. Baltimore is gangland central. Have you seen the pictures of Detroit? Detroit has had so many people flee the city. There are entire sections of the city with abandoned houses. All of these Detroit revival stories play well in the media, except they're not quite true. Detroit is not doing well. The Motor City USA trends for the car industry, they've largely collapsed. For Kamala Harris to scream racism about him pointing out these cities, New Orleans as well among them, she's trying to get black voters to come her way by pointing out the failures of these cities. But even black Americans also understand what Donald Trump is talking about. I got plenty of friends of mine. In fact, we got neighbors up the street from us. You know where they're from? Baltimore. They came to Georgia because better work and it's safer. They live in my neighborhood. I know people who have fled Detroit. I actually know a guy who's moved to Detroit because he got a house for cheap and fixed it up. But most of the people I know from Detroit are people who formerly lived in Detroit. It's just a statement of fact. Democrats in these big cities, these urban areas like this, they're not doing well. They're no Andre Dawkins. So the mayor of Atlanta. Now, I'm a little biased, and this is one of those times where program directors across America say, you've mentioned Atlanta too much. You've hit your quota for the day. The reality is you want a city that is well run by a Democrat, Atlanta, Georgia. Now, listen, the people of Atlanta and the surrounding environs of Atlanta will love to complain and say that's not so. But it is a night and day difference between the current mayor of Atlanta and the previous mayor of Atlanta and the mayor before that. Kasim Reed was many things. He blocked me on social media, but Kasim Reed was actually a good, competent steward of the city. Keisha Crimeway Bottoms didn't do so well. She decided for her own reelection. She misjudged the situation, and she decided to side with Black Lives Matter over the police officers of the city, and many of them quit and provoked a crime wave in the city. Mayor Dawkins came in, and he told the police. And guess what? The business community in the Buckhead area of Atlanta has settled down. It works well with the mayor. And the mayor has gone about just being about good government. This is something I think people don't understand. Contrast with Baltimore, contrast with Detroit. And part of it are the trend lines, too. And I know this is one of those times people get sensitive. But let's just be honest here. What happened in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, during the civil rights movement and the Jim Crow era, a lot of black people from the South moved north. And they moved to Detroit, and they moved to Chicago, and they moved to Baltimore. And in the South, the black families that stayed, they were committed to their geography and their region, and they were committed to the success of their cities. And over time, as black populations in the South grew in many of these cities, what they realized in places like Atlanta, Birmingham, and elsewhere, Charlotte, is we can form an alliance with the businesses. And through business and good government, we can break down racial barriers. And in Atlanta is a textbook example of this, where the black community and the business community that was predominantly white worked hand in hand to make sure their city was well run. In places like Detroit, they were single industry towns. And when those single industries began collapsing, there was no game plan. But in Atlanta, Atlanta was about Atlanta. Atlanta wasn't about a single industry. Think about it. Atlanta has Coca-Cola. Atlanta has Home Depot. Atlanta has Delta Airlines, banks and healthcare industries. Detroit had GM, Ford, Chrysler. I don't know what exactly Baltimore ever had, but it doesn't have whatever it had now. It's just got gangs. But the mayor of Atlanta understands the business of Atlanta is business. And if business is growing and happy, the city is prosperous. Detroit became about racial grievance at some point. And people left. Unemployment soared. Job opportunities were lost. And a lot of it came down to the decisions made at the local level and the state level. And Donald Trump's right. It has nothing really to do with race. It has everything to do with good governance. And those cities don't have good governance. They have corrupt governance. Atlanta went through a time where you would just assume that the city could run itself, and then you got Keisha Crimeway Bottoms in there, and the bottom fell out of the city. And people realized, oh, wait, we got to get a competent mayor in, and we got to have competent police chief. We got to have a competent city. And it's by no means perfect, but it sure is better than it was under the last mayor. And it turns out mayors actually can make a difference. And cities can actually function. Jack Kemp was a big proponent of good municipal governance. And he believed that Republicans shouldn't be afraid to go into cities and say, if we can have good governance, even with Democratic mayors, we can promote businesses in cities and suburbs, and it's good for everybody. Republican and Democrat alike. He pushed that issue, and it worked. And Republicans sometimes now think, black voters, we're not going to win with them. Why bother? Well, you know what? Donald Trump's doing pretty good with black voters. He's doing better than any Republican since Richard Nixon in 1960, if the polling's to be believed. And by the way, the polling averages, I think, are probably right on this. Does it mean that black voters will give Donald Trump a majority vote? No, they're not going to give Donald Trump a majority of the vote. Kamala Harris is going to win at least 60%, maybe 70% of the black vote, but she should be winning 90%. And then the question is not, do they turn out and vote for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, but do they stay home? Because the odds are they don't go vote for Donald Trump, they stay home, and that's still a vote for Donald Trump. Historically, black voters, they're not going to vote Republican in this country, but they might stay home, and that helps Donald Trump too. But the reality is this: younger black men, they don't care about the racial grievances of elderly black Democrats. They care about their families and they care about their jobs. And they had jobs when Donald Trump was president, and in many cases, Donald Trump got a lot of younger and older black men out of prison. Friends and family members, their dads. Told you all the story, and I realized it's anecdote, but when I was in Las Vegas, I was staying at the Encore and was talking to the guy in charge of the craps table. He knew who I was, listened to me on the radio, not really a Republican. But he said he couldn't vote for Kamala Harris. He couldn't vote for Joe Biden at the time because Joe Biden had actually signed the law that put too many of his relatives in prison. And Donald Trump signed the legislation that got him out of jail, and he was planning on voting for Trump. Didn't much care for Trump, but he's going to vote for Donald Trump because Donald Trump got relatives out of prison that Joe Biden put in prison. These sorts of things matter at scale. Again, here's something you got to understand. I was talking to a candidate for office. I won't go into all the details, but his wife is a black Republican, was very insistent he was going to get a majority support of the black vote. God told her he was going to get a majority of the black vote. Philip and I were at this breakfast with this candidate, and the wife was just absolutely insistent he would get a majority of the black vote. And I was instructed beforehand, if it came up, don't argue with her. God had told her this. He did not get a majority of the black vote. Donald Trump's not going to get a majority of the black vote, but it doesn't matter. If he gets a larger minority of the vote than Republicans have in the past, he's going to win. And he's on track to do that, which is why the Democrats are hysterically, furiously now lecturing young black men. But you know what? Those young black men were alive when Donald Trump was president, and they were better off then than they are right now. And so they'll go vote for Trump, see if they can get those good times back. And who can blame them other than Kamala Harris, who put a lot of their fathers in jail in California? Now, let me tell you about Hillsdale College before I get out of here, because Hillsdale College would love to educate you. In fact, you know, Imprimis this month has been great on these prison issues. They've had a good explanation on price controls and why they're bad, a good explanation on overcriminalization, decriminalization, and the crime trends in this country. It's all been very informative. Show prep for my brain. It can be for yours as well, completely free. If you go to ericforhillsdale.com today, not only can you get a free pocket Constitution and Declaration of Independence from Hillsdale College, you can sign up for Imprimis. And again, it's completely free. And you get just highly educational material explaining what price controls are, how they work, why they're bad, explaining the crime trends in the country, and the skew data. Did you know, for example, that a lot of cities now don't report their crime trends to the FBI because they changed their system? You get all the facts and figures from Hillsdale College. It's actual education. It's not indoctrination. You can even get their great courses from Larry Arnn, from Victor Davis Hanson, so much more. EricForHillsdale.com. ERICK. EricForHillsdale.com. You can even get their amazing podcast for free on your favorite podcast app. Just look for the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. It's EricForHillsdale.com. Start a great relationship with Hillsdale College. Hello, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. I am glad to have you. I just need to put something out here at the end. So this is what I get from progressives. Progressives will often say, you Christians, other than her position on abortion, you don't really have any reason to oppose Kamala Harris. Do you? Actually, you know, Kamala Harris was the author of legislation in the Senate to end the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Kamala Harris also supported suing nuns for them to pay for abortion. Kamala Harris has also championed transgender issues and putting boys in girls sports. Kamala Harris has championed using the Department of Education to pressure local school districts into being more open about trans rights. Kamala Harris has also failed at the border and overwhelmed local areas in this country with illegal immigrants, which is not really loving your neighbor. Kamala Harris has also used the government or supported using the government to punish Christian charities that are not down with the progressive agenda. Kamala Harris has actually been deeply hostile to people of faith in this country. So it goes beyond abortion. And she also wants to end the filibuster. And if you end the filibuster, that will more likely than not allow the Democrats, if they take the House, Senate, and the presidency, to stack the Supreme Court with a bunch of people who roll back the advances made in religious freedom in this country. Kamala Harris has also supported those who have pursued lawsuits against Christian nonprofits. Kamala Harris, during her time as Attorney General in California, suggested she supported ending the tax-exempt status of churches in this country if they didn't go along with gay marriage. Kamala Harris, as Attorney General in California, was the one who refused to defend the state's law on traditional marriage, opening the door to gay marriage in the country. Kamala Harris has been pretty progressive on these issues. It goes way beyond abortion. Get out of your simplistic thinking. Kamala Harris has been deeply hostile to people of faith. So again, if you're one of those people who says, I'm a Christian, I could never vote for Donald Trump. Okay, but you can't vote for Kamala Harris either. Because with Trump, you may not like his personality in politics, but with Kamala Harris, she has both lived her life and her advanced policies that are deeply hostile to your faith. So better to allow the field to be fallow than to plant the seeds of a harvest that you don't want to reap with Kamala Harris. I'm just continue, however, to be shocked at the number of people who just insist that if it weren't for abortion, all you Christians would vote for Kamala Harris. No, it's far beyond abortion. All these left-wing cultural issues that you people find are no big deal. It's actually a pretty big deal to a lot of Christians. I mean, Kamala Harris supported shutting down Catholic charities in Philadelphia because they only wanted to help place kids in the homes of heterosexual married couples. She wanted to shut down a charity that actually helped kids get adopted because they didn't adopt to everybody, just within their framework of their faith. Grow up and like understand people on the other side before you say stuff like that, y'all.